Courte intro juste pour vous dire que cette vidéo, c'est l'interview de John James que j'ai réalisée en décembre 2019, il me semble. Je trouve ça super important de vous montrer l'intégralité de l'interview parce que John James c'est un monsieur qui connaît beaucoup de choses sur le climat, sur le réchauffement climatique et il aborde plein de sujets dans cette interview qui sont très intéressants. J'ai coupé l'interview en deux parties, histoire que ce soit un peu plus digeste, et la deuxième partie sortira dans une semaine, je pense. Voilà, n'hésitez pas à me faire part de votre opinion et de votre avis, et je vous fais des bisous.
For 40 years, I've been studying climate change. I'm a research historian. I look at facts as I find them and analyze them. I don't build up theories on anything except the facts that I'm given. So I'm not a scientist, but I speak with my 40-year knowledge of science and my depth of reading for a newsletter that I have run on climate science. So my background in this is pretty solid. And most of the scientists I speak to, and many of the papers I read, give me the same story. It is probably too late at this moment to do anything about what is coming. When the last United Nations report came out, it told us that we had only 12 years to fix the problem of climate change. Otherwise, it was going to be too late. Now, this was an enormous report. It's had a huge effect on everybody, but it's actually too conservative. It does not follow the truth of what is actually happening. The report works on the idea that the world will become 1.5 degrees hotter and then 2 degrees hotter by 2030. This report is based on the best scientific evidence, which has then been modified by every politician in the world. Every country has had to sign off on the report, and therefore their politics has reduced the scientific value of what the report has said. So the report says nothing about methane, nothing at all about what's called the albedo effect, which is the reflection of the solar heat from the Arctic and the Arctic ice. And if you remove the ice, the impact on the rest of the world is catastrophic, because suddenly that enormous amount of heat is not being reflected back. That is not taken into account in the report. And there are 7 items like this that are ignored. Ice collapse, for example. Not even an estimate of the possibility of ice collapse, because they argued that since we didn't know, we shouldn't make a guess. With the ice, we know it's melting, we don't know the speed, and we can only guess at the impact. But it's like an insurance policy. When something is likely, such as a bushfire, then you make an estimate of the likelihood of it happening. Now here with the IPCC report, all of these different things have been left out. One of the big items left out is about tipping points. Now this is where the heat builds up to such a point that some action is forced into the globe, and then no more heat is needed to continue reproducing that action. For example, if I put a certain amount of heat into the ocean, then I can not worry about putting any more heat in, because the ocean is going to continue to exhale that heat everywhere in the world and make us all hotter. This is a tipping point. We trigger something and everything begins to then move on its own, and we do not need to trigger it anymore to get more CO2. Tipping points are incredibly important. We think we have already passed 3 tipping points, and there are others. What the tipping points do is they lead to what is called a hothouse Earth, in which everything about the Earth is creating more heat from itself. We could turn off every powerhouse, every coal-fired station, turn them all off, and it would still continue to heat. And that would give us a landscape like Mars or Venus. That would be disastrous. These are not taken into account in the IPCC report. Let's imagine that we're trying to add up the sum of all of our problems. It doesn't quite work this way because something increases temperature and that triggers something else to increase it, and these are in fact interlocked issues. But if we added them up as if we're creating a sum, this is a very interesting graph because it shows that we have up in the top here the rise from 1900, which is a rise of 1.6 degrees. And this depends how we measure it, because measuring depends on the starting date. Where do I put the end of the ruler? If I put the end in, say, 1900, the temperature increase has not been so great. But if I go back and I put this starting point in when industrialization started in 1750, then we start looking at an increase since the first use of coal in an industrial way of about 1.6 degrees. So we are already over 2 degrees. It all depends where you put the end of the ruler and start the calculation. This is the aerosol effect that I was mentioning to you that happens when there's no ice. Take the ice away from the Arctic, and of course worse with the Antarctic. The sunlight goes straight down and gets absorbed by the ocean, then goes all the way around the world and radiates heat back onto land. If the ice is not there, it's the equivalent of adding, in this calculation, almost a degree. Then there is what's called the aerosol masking. Now this is all the pollution that we've put up over many, many years. And this pollution acts like a blanket around the Earth, and it in fact protects us. The rubbish that we breathe, that's come out of all of industry, is protecting the Earth from the full impact of the hot sun. If we stopped being industrial, if we stopped the coal plants and if we stopped burning everything, and this material dropped out of the sky back to the ground, temperatures would go up over 1 degree. And it's calculated that this would happen within 1 or 2 years. It would be a very quick transformation. Even to remove 20% of that pushes temperatures up at least half a degree. So this is the conundrum we're in, of course, which is a slightly different issue to what I've been talking about, which is that if we stop the pollution, if we stop putting CO2 into the air, then we stop industrialization, and all these particles fall out of the sky, and our temperature goes up through the roof. So we become our own worst enemies at a certain level. And there is methane. Oh my God, methane. We know how powerful methane is, as roughly 30 times more powerful than CO2. And there are vast quantities of methane, most of Siberia, much of the Antarctic, big areas of Canada are permafrost. And the permafrost is basically coal that hasn't, or dead trees from past times that have not yet been turned into coal, and they contain methane instead of CO2. Now, this starts to explode into the air. If you go back hundreds of thousands of years and we measure temperatures in ice cores, we discover that the temperatures will go up and then work their way down, then suddenly they'll go up and then they'll work their way down and suddenly they'll go up. You've all seen these graphs, you know what they're like. The sudden upward movement of temperature is largely caused by methane. It suddenly gets ejected and makes a huge impact very quickly. The IPCC report does not mention this at all. So again, it is misleading. This is a graph produced by a group of scientists who think that 10 degrees is on the way. We will all stop living at 4. At 4 degrees, most of us will find the world an impossible place to inhabit. Too dry, too hot, too many storms, etc. 1 degree, we're not doing very well. At 2 degrees, we're going to start to do very badly. And at 3 degrees, we can write off most of the people on the planet. And by 4, we're done. Even that IPCC report that I began this talk with has said that none of the reductions that we would like to see in CO2 in the air is possible unless we actually start to draw it back down and sequester it. Pull the CO2 out of the air and put it back somewhere underground. That's a condition. They're saying if we don't do that, then we're not going to stop this happening. But to do that, and these are the costs I have so far, to do that requires us spending as much to pull it out of the air as we have made putting it up there. A vast amount of money is required. Huge equipment, so much energy, and the energy we put into getting it out is putting all that energy back into the air again. The net effect would be something, but let us ask, can we get the Chinese to agree? Would the Indians agree? Would the Americans agree? These are your 3 major polluters. These are the ones that are really causing the problem. And they're so embroiled in their own politics that it's very unlikely that they will look after the world before their national interests. So I wouldn't expect any great change to happen. I would expect us to go on the same path as we've been going on, with conditions steadily getting hotter and more difficult for human beings to live. Here's the business model that we've got today. Oil, natural gas, coal, and other bits and pieces. And this is 2019 here. That's what we've got to. So we go on, business as usual, doing the same sort of thing. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. There's no sign. For the Kyoto conference was down here. Since Kyoto, and we've known the problem at that point, look what's happened. Therefore, we would need something rather like that. We come to 2019 and we just take all of that away, we kill all these things, we stop them all, and we give them 10 years to die. And if we then try a little bit further, and in 12 years' time become totally renewable, nothing but blue, all these things become nothing, we still lose the aerosol in the sky, we still lose the ice in the Arctic and the Antarctic, because these are processes that will continue automatically now. They are past the tipping point, so they will continue to destroy themselves more and more. The ice will continue to melt, and as it melts, the water levels come up, and we lose our coastal properties. We don't have airports here, and this includes fuel for aeroplanes, down to nothing. So you don't get home. Nobody gets what they wanted. We're all poor. So we're back at making this as unreal. It's sad and sadder.